Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. Everyone carries a part of society on his shoulders. No one is relieved of his share of responsibility by others, and no one can find a safe way out for himself if society is sweeping towards destruction. Therefore, everyone, in his own interests, must thrust himself vigorously into the intellectual battle. None can stand aside with unconcern. The interest of everyone hangs on the result. Whether he chooses or not, every man is drawn into the great historical struggle, the decisive battle into which our epoch has plunged us. Ludwig von Mises. Our guest today is an exemplar of this quote. It just blew out to me when I was preparing. We connected through an unbelievable community of international stewards of culture called the Alliance of Responsible Citizenship through the app. They come from a long line of stewards of culture and leadership, creating this unbelievable organization in South Africa. I believe Angloval, a generational family, generational success. They've been an investor and an entrepreneur for decades now, work with some of the best entrepreneurs on the planet that you've heard of, we'll talk about. And they when I discovered them and saw their truth, them sharing their thoughts, feelings, emotions in a time of uncertainty and opacity. I was like, wow, I can't wait for this episode. Without further ado, Rob Hersov, thanks so much for coming on the Culture Matters podcast.
Jason, what an honor, what a pleasure. The first time we've seen each other is 5 minutes ago. And that quote sent a shiver up my spine. So please send it to me by WhatsApp because, in a way, I came to that realization late in life and it's changed my life. And I now look at myself in the mirror and I feel proud of myself
Hmm.
for the first time. And we can talk about that. Wow, what a
Amen.
quote.
Well, the quote came from Ludwig von Mises. This is the libertarian intellectual. This many that haven't even heard that listen to the show. So my first question is, to you, what is the idea of libertarianism, and what relationship has that had with your business journey, your business success, if any at all?
So I came to libertarianism in the mid 80s when I lived in New York. And I had finished my schooling. I grew up in South Africa, fourth generation South African, born into wealth. My grandfather founded what became one of the largest mining industrial companies in South Africa. And he died young at age 57. And my father and my grandfather's partner then took over the business. And my father ran it for a long time and was hoping that I'd come back to run it, which I didn't want to do. That's a separate story. But in the 80s, I'd finished school, university in South Africa, military service in South Africa, which was in the apartheid era. I was an infantry officer for 2 years in the South African Defense Force. So it was national service. And then in 1985, I left to go and see the world and ended up getting a job with Goldman Sachs in New York. I mean, I fluked that. I would, under normal circumstances, would never have got the job, but I happened to be in Hong Kong, was introduced to the right person at the right time. He got all excited about me, called New York, said, I'm hiring this guy. And they said, send him to New York for training. For 3 months, we'll send him back to you in Hong Kong. I never made it back to Hong Kong. I was like, I like America. I want to be here. And in the mid 80s, there was a kind of neoconservative movement. It was pretty strong. I mean, it was all the effect of Reagan and all those good things that happened in the US. And I was reading books like crazy about, conservative politics and Reagan and free markets. And, I dug deep into Adam Smith. And then I stumbled upon Ayn Rand, as one does. And I read all Ayn Rand's books the sovereign individual, the whole concept of that resonated with me. And I became a libertarian and always have been. And funnily enough, a lot of my friends, when they say, what is a libertarian? And I explain to them, well, the basis is freedom, the sovereign individual, liberty, and small government. Let the individual decide what is good for them and trust them to decide what is good for their town, city, society. It's
Mm.
all down to the individual. And most of my friends kind of agree with the proposition. And I say, well, you are actually a libertarian. So it's about tiny government, And it's just the most powerful, powerful um, narrative I've ever discovered. And seeing Javier Milei in Argentina, a libertarian or minarchist, as he describes himself, putting into play exactly everything that I believe in. It's a real live experiment, and the results are already flowing, and the rest of the world cannot but notice.
For those that are not familiar what's happening there, what is happening there?
So a year and a half ago, after 100 years of socialism, in the 1920s, Argentina was, I think, the seventh richest country on earth. There was a Harrods store in the center of Buenos Aires. And there was an expression to be as rich as in Argentina. They were exporting beef and grain to the world. Argentina, I think, was the fifth or sixth richest country in the world in the 1920s. And then socialism took its hold. And over 100 years, absolutely destroyed the economy, as socialism does. And Javier Milei, an economist who'd been in a rock band, who has kind of a wacky hairstyle, ended up in control and became the president a year and a half ago. Inflation was at 2,500%. The peso was worth nothing. Everything was collapsing. And he managed to get control. He didn't actually get a majority, but he patched together control. And his, when he was standing for election, he had this sort of chainsaw. He said, I'm going to cut costs. I'm going to cut bureaucracy. I'm going to cut regulation. I'm going to free Argentina. And he go, libertas, freedom, at the end of every speech. I mean, he's kind of a wild, wacky, crazy guy. And he got in and immediately implemented changes. And like South Africa, Argentina had huge social welfare grants for the poor. I mean, socialism destroys the economy, so you could actually provide social welfare grants. He stripped out the middleman, released a huge amount of money into the economy to pay down debt, which they're paying down, without touching the social grants to the people that needed them. What he's done, he's taken inflation from 2,500% to 2% a month, which is still high, but it's coming down further. And this is the most extraordinary case of an economic adventure, an economic case study live. And he and Elon Musk are speaking every day. By the way, one more thing about Argentina. There were 18 cabinet ministers. There was a ministry of women. What does a ministry of women do? Men and women are treated equally. End of story. Radical feminism is for people with mental health problems. And he took the 18 ministries, got rid of 9 of them, and he had a president and 9 ministers. And one ministry he added, the Minister of Deregulation. And the one thing that, when Donald Trump was running for his first term, that one thing that I absolutely said, this guy, I love the way he thinks, was he said, if anyone wants to introduce a new regulation, a new law, they've got to get rid of 2 beforehand. And I went, I like this guy. There are laws and regulations. The world is over-regulated. Too many lawyers, too many bureaucrats. And Argentina has a minister of deregulation to get rid of laws. And that's he and Elon Musk are speaking on a regular basis.
Are there comparisons that you see in that macro political sense to, I'm thinking as a young man coming up in a conglomerate, I'm thinking of the possibility of bureaucracy manifesting itself over indulgence and rules and principles.
Yeah, there's a
Is there a
message for
relationship there
sure.
of what you've seen work versus what doesn't?
100%. So in big corporates, like in economies, it's so easy to add new rules without getting rid of old ones. It's just very easy. And always in politics, you find at the political highest level, very few business people and too many lawyers, regulators, and bureaucrats. Too many people that did political science degrees, not enough people that did engineering and business degrees in every government in the world. And it's a big mistake. The wrong people are getting into power. So they all want to regulate. They all think we're in power. We know what's best to everyone else. Let's add more rules. But they don't look at what they've got to get rid of. And I'll give you a little business example. There is an American called Vernon Hill III. Okay. And Vernon Hill III, I mean, if you went to Central Casting, okay, and I love the guy, and you said, I want an American who's got 3 sticks in his name with a comb over with a gorgeous brassy wife who tells you within the first 2 minutes how wealthy he is, how big his house is, you know, um, it'll be Vernon Hill. Okay, Vernon, I love you. So I'm not being an insult, but that's central casting. But he came to the UK and he was the first person in 150 years to launch a new bank. He launched Metro Bank, a new high street bank in Britain. It was a big success. And he had a logo and he had stickers, he had posters in all his retail stores saying, no stupid rules. And employees were allowed to come to him with what they thought were stupid rules, and he'd remove them. So he was deregulating at a company level, and it empowers employees because, then there's a rule you can and can't do the following. You've got to book the conference room 3 days in advance. You can only drink the coffee out of these cups. And they go, what's the point of these rules? How did they get in? How do we get rid of them? So Elon Musk is doing exactly that. He's tackling waste, but he's also tackling inefficiency, and inefficiency is built into overregulation. So there's a corporate political lesson. But watch Argentina. Wow.
When you were were you studying in the US when you built were you working at Goldman when you got the relationship with this Rupert
So
gentleman?
yeah, no, that was before. So I went to Goldman Sachs. I was an investment banker, working on IPOs and all sorts of things. And I, I remember this. I've got lots of little stories from that. But you learn how to operate in America. And I remember I'd been there. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing for the first few months, but I got away with it. I was good at the jaw. And I remember that the head of the Texas office came to me and he said, "Now I need you to come and work on a big Texas deal with me. Master Limited Partnerships was like this oil deal." And I said, "Why me?" So I'm not even the smartest investment banker. He said, "No, you're single, you've got a good accent, and my guy who's running the deal, his girlfriend has a younger sister who's very attractive at UT. And if you can fly down and at least take her out for dinner and date her we could win this deal. We could win the biggest deal in Texas." I was the beard. And then he gave me, and she was gorgeous, I must say. So Wendy Phillips. Wow. And she went to UT. But the interesting part of the story was he said to me, "Let me give you a lesson about Southerners in America. Just because they speak slow doesn't mean they're stupid. Be very careful. When they say, 'Howdy, Rob, nice to meet you,' and you think this guy's a hick," and they're not. They're smart as hell. So I
Wow.
loved America. I loved it. I went from Goldman Sachs. I got into Harvard Business School. And I always say I wasn't smart enough to get into Oxford and Cambridge because my father and brother were. And I went to Harvard Business School and I was the only South African there. And, my Facebook, which was a book in those days, said 2 years investment banking, Goldman Sachs, 2 years infantry officer, South African Defense Force. And not one African American at Harvard Business School when I was there spoke to me for 2 years. They just assumed I was some sort of lunatic fascist. And I went to my 20th reunion and these guys all came up and I was with my wife and they were like, "Rob, good to see you again." And I said, "Lovely to see you." I said, "My wife, you didn't say a word to me in 2 years." They just blanked me. Anyway, life moves on. When I was at
Wow.
Harvard Business School, and this is a true story, everybody had their jobs teed up. In those days, it was, consulting and investment banking. That was it. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and McKinsey and Bain. That was and then I think Goldman would have taken me back, but it's not what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be, with an exciting human being. And I looked around and there was Rupert Murdoch, and he'd just kind of hit the scenes in America. I think he'd bought the New York Post, and but he was, he'd obviously done big stuff in the UK, coming out of Australia, and he'd kind of hit the scene. He was starting to hit the news as the mover and shaker in the media business in America. And I said, I like Australians, Antipodeans. I like this guy Murdoch. I want to work for him. And so I made a decision. I targeted him. I said, I want to work for him. I want to be in the
Wow.
media business. And I was dating this girl, this gorgeous redhead. I can't remember her name. And she said, "Oh, you want to be in the media business?" Well, this is a true story, by the way. I said, "You should meet Stan Schumann." And Stan Schumann was one of the top guys at Allen and Company. Allen and Company is one of the biggest media investment banks in America and in the world. And I said, wow, I'd love to, media business. And so I went for my meeting in New York at the introduction of a girl who was this guy's a friend of her father, Stan Schumann. Okay, look him up. He's an impressive guy. And and I got the interview with Rupert Murdoch, and I only said one word in 3 interviews. Okay, listen to this. So I went in, and Stan said, "You're Rob. Nice to meet you. So you want to be in the media business? Well, before you say anything, we're a media investment bank. This is investment banking. And in a sense, you were Goldman, you don't want to be in investment banking again. But I'm on the board of News Corp, Rupert Murdoch's business, my eyes lit up. And I think you should have a chat to News Corp, be really in the media business. But before you do anything, I'm going to send you down and meet a guy called John Evans, because he's the top strategist for News Corp. Sit tight." Picks up the phone. "John, Stan here. I've got a South African, Harvard Business School. Name's Rob. Yeah, I know, Harvard Business School. Sorry about that, but I'm sending him down to meet you because I think he should be in the media business." So now, okay, fine. So he writes the address, hands me a piece of paper. Nice. I haven't said a word to him. Shakes my hand. Off you go. Go see John. I walk into John's office. I'm like G.I. Joe. Everyone was dressed like IBM salesman in those days, like shirt and tie, GI haircut. And I walk in. John's got this long, gray, stringy hair and scruffy everything. And he shakes my hand and he goes, "Before you say anything, let me tell you, I'm a reformed alcoholic and drug addict, and I'm marrying a girl half my age. Now sit down." I still haven't said a word, okay? And he was the guy who kind of went to Rupert and said, in a supermarket, people go and buy fish and chips. So fish, chips, and peas should all be in the same area. It shouldn't be away from that. He was like way out there. So he talked to me about 15 minutes about his thinking of media. I still haven't said a word, okay, in my interview. And he goes, "Well, if you want to be at News Corp, you got to meet Rupert." So he dials the number, picks the phone, and says, "Rupert, I've got a young South African, Rob, who's Harvard Business, Harvard Business School," because Rupert didn't like MBAs. And he said, he can come see you now. Sure. He writes down Rupert's address, says to me, "Go see Rupert." Okay, I still haven't said a word. I still haven't said anything. So I walk across town to 1211 6th Avenue, and I go up to Rupert's office, and his secretary obviously knows. She says, "Please go on in." Rupert gets up, rubs his forehead, it always did, shakes my hand, says, "You're Rob, right? Please sit down." Still haven't said anything. And he goes, "Well, Rob, what do you think the future of the media business is?" And I go, "Technology?" And he goes, "No, it's content." And he talks for 10 minutes about how content, and he was right. He was right, Wow. And then the end of it, I'd said one word to three people. And the end of it, he goes, "Okay, well, can you be here on Monday morning?" And I went, "Yeah." And I said, "What am I going to do?" And he goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" I mean, I basically got the job. It said one word, technology, and the wrong word. And I said, "Well, why don't I work for you for 4 months and, just carry a bag, do everything. And if it doesn't work out, you can throw me into one of your divisions." He said, "Fantastic. I'll see you on Monday morning." I hadn't even graduated. I'd still had the graduation ceremony. I was meant to go on holiday with my parents. So what am I saying here? I'm saying luck. I'm not saying date redheads because they're lucky, but I'm saying a bit of luck, a bit of chutzpah, as the expression goes. And things happen. If you're not in the game, you don't get to play the game. If you don't turn up to the start, you're not in the race. So always put yourself out there. And I said to my daughter, took her for an ice cream today, and we were in a long line waiting. They weren't standing there. And I just started chatting to the people around me about nonsense. My daughter's a bit embarrassed. She's 13. Like, "Daddy, what you do?" All my life, I've spoken to people on aeroplanes, in waiting room, whatever. And I've met the most extraordinary people that have ended up on my board of directors, people that have invested in my businesses, people that have helped me when I'm down, or I've helped them. And it's called networking. It's a terrible thing, but engage people, treat people, everybody equally. Rupert Murdoch always did that. He talked to the taxi driver when he took taxis. He'd talk to the elevator guy, and he'd be genuinely interested in what they say. He'd listen to them. He'd ask them, "Why do you read this newspaper, not the newspaper? When you read a newspaper, what page do you open it up to? Where do you live? How long does it take you?" And he'd ask them and be when he was with you, you'd be the most
Wow.
important person on the planet. And I learned that. I learned it from my dad and from him. Treat everybody respectfully, nicely,
What
smile, you know.
some of your grandfather's core values, you think?
I never met him. He was 57, but everybody says he's the most compassionate, gentle, loving, kind man. And that's a hard thing to say about a businessman who's hugely successful, because you
Yeah.
assume there's got to be ruthlessness. But I don't think there ever has to be ruthlessness in anything. I really don't. I think you've got to be smart. You've got to be kind when needed, tough when needed, and decisive all the time. And I guess Harvard Business School, if they taught me anything, it was be confident in speaking out, because you've got to do that in case study, but be decisive. They give you case studies, and some nights there'd be 300 pages to read,
Wow.
2 to 3 different case studies. You could never get through it all. But what they were teaching you was get as much information as you can and make a decision. The nerds that stayed up all night reading it 10 times to try and get the right answer would fail. But the guys who kind of read enough, make a decision and stand with it, even if you're wrong. And it's about momentum. And that in life, I'd rather make a wrong or a suboptimal decision, but keep things moving forward. People look to you for a decision, make it and go. If you've got a bit of information, you can do it.
Mm.
So momentum is hugely important. Whereas, sitting back and waiting for someone to give you more information or try and help you with a decision, often the boat's stalled, then you lose your wind.
I believe it was himself and a stockbroking partner. I'm talking about your grandfather.
Correct.
What did they see that others may not have at the time?
So
This
my
is like the
grandfather
late
was
20s, early
one of
30s.
4 sons, and my great grandfather couldn't afford to send all 4 to university. So the smartest one, Grandpa Bob, went and did mining engineering.
Wow.
And he, I mean, it's quite interesting what he did. He was a mining engineer, and his best friend was a stockbroker, Slip Mill. And he looked at the big finds around Johannesburg, where mines had been drilled to great depths to find gold. And he looked at the pattern and he said, this isn't just mining down. There must be a reef that links these. There seems to be a pattern linking them. So he went and bought the land between mines and sunk pipes down and discovered that this was a massive reef that linked things horizontally, not just vertically. It wasn't just a gold, a
Mm.
pipe of gold. It was a reef of gold that covers hundreds of kilometers. And that's how he initially built his first fortune. And then he went into cement and food and everything else. And, by the time my father took over, it was a giant mining industrial organization.
Many of our listeners are small business entrepreneurs, lower middle market,
Mm.
Main Street, that may be in business already with their best friend and may or may not, maybe not working out. So, what about those two that, because
Yeah,
when I was
good
raised,
dynamic. It's a great question. Best friends in business doesn't last 3 generations.
yeah,
It
like
does
that is a
not.
golden ticket right there. What
Uh,
exactly would you say is going
it's
on?
sort of 1 generation can be a success, 2 families. The next generation, there's going to be stress. By the third generation, there's no way you can continue it. And we didn't. We ended up breaking up the business. They kept mining, we kept in industries. And, now people can't, the Hersov name from a business heritage point of view is almost to be forgotten. But here's the interesting thing that I see myself. I'm the third generation. And the expression, the first generation makes it, the second builds it, the third loses it. Or in the Chinese proverb, clogs to clogs in 3 generations. That great fortunes cannot survive 3 generations unless you just have one son, one son, one son. Then you can. It just doesn't work. And so what's my challenge? My challenge is I've been given, firstly, my parents are still alive. Dad's 99 this year, mum's 92.
Wow,
So
that's amazing.
people go, he's a trust fund baby. I said, well, I haven't got the trust fund yet. Okay. I've had to make it on my own. But I've been given every opportunity, education wise, introduced to people. I've come in at a privileged level. But unlike almost everyone I know at a third generation, I've taken every opportunity and made the best of it. I had failure. I've had a lot of failure in business and elsewhere, but I've had a lot of success too. And I think the great challenge is, how do I make my children hungry? How do they stay hungry, stay focused? Which is a different challenge to most of your listeners who, have probably started from nothing and built something. I got given every opportunity, but I haven't sat back like most people who've inherited money and done very little. I still hustle, I work, I try and do the right thing. I, take risks, invest, build, and try and do my best.
What's worked for you and how you've created a plan or aimed towards that plan? Or
So because I've had a safety net, I've been able to take more risks than most people. Starting businesses, investing in things, and most people actually are held back by, married or kids have got a mortgage. They've got to actually pay the damn mortgage. They've got to pay for the kids' schooling. They'd like to go out and start their own business, but, the salary from the corporate is keeping them above water and they're just not quite ready. Okay. And I know that must be a horrific thing. And often being fired or having a business collapse forces you to then go and do what you've always meant to do in life. Failure is a terrible thing in most of the world. You fail, you're never going to get a second chance. In America, it's seen as a learning lesson. And that's so strong and so healthy. I'm a great admirer of your country, although I want a strong America. I believe in America. And every day I thank America for all you've done to save the world. I really do. So putting that aside, my challenge is I know I have a drive, a hunger, and I've pushed and taken advantage and tried my best. And I want to make sure my sons, I have two older sons, 28, 25, and then two younger children, also have that kind of discipline and commitment. And, you and I, before we went online, we were speaking about books. And I've read thousands more books than my children had at their age. Wow. But you say you've listened to thousands of books. You've still got that incredible depth of learning from books. But through audio.
Yeah, I have some shame around that. I'm not quite sure how to take it. Like,
have you read Moby Dick? Have you read some of the classics?
I started it. I started, don't finish many things.
So
I do like that
reading
book. Very, yeah, maybe I'm on page 60 of Moby Dick.
Yeah, I'm reading A Brave New World for about the third time. So there's no manual on marriage or on raising children. There really isn't. You make it up as you go along. You try and do the best. My wife is an extraordinary wife, an extraordinary mother, an extraordinary human being. I mean, I wouldn't be here without her. I wouldn't be this person without her. I'd have blown up on the way, I'm sure. So,
and she's a very successful entrepreneur, isn't she? I was finding that as well.
Yeah. She's a doctor from New Zealand, gorgeous, and that's quite rare in New Zealand. As all my New Zealand friends tell me, say, you damn South African, you're still the only gorgeous one we ever produced. But she, when we met, she was a doctor, and I stole her and took her to London. And I said, what are you going to do? And she said, well, I don't want to be in the NHS, but I've got this idea, and I think it could be a good business. So I said, well, tell me the story. She told me, I want to start a business that explains illness and health to children in a way they can understand. Because when I diagnose children with some terrible affliction, the hardest bit is explaining to the parents what is going on with the kid, what to expect, and how to deal with it. And then have a way for them to explain to their friends at school and handle it. That whole side, there's nothing. Wow. So she founded a business called MediKids, which was like a combination of medicine meets Marvel comics.
Wow.
And the comic books would be like, what's up with Sally? MediKids explains scoliosis. What's up with Ben? MediKids explains autism. And they produce, I don't know, 100 comic books on different afflictions in 40 languages. And it grew slowly. And then they moved it to New York, hired professional management, best thing they ever did, brought in venture capital, not easy, but it worked out. And then it took off. And in COVID, it pivoted into clinical trials information. And she sold her business last year. She's the gorgeous unicorn in our family. So but it was 12 years, heavy lifting. You know, I invested along the way, so did friends of ours. You know, it had its usual disasters that companies do, and it made it and sold, you know, big seven-figure number. And
What would you say the core values were or the culture that led to that success?
she never gave up. She never gave up. And it's a bit like Stoicism, which I practice Stoicism around holiday, is the obstacle is the way, you know,
Great book.
amor fati. And she, you know, she never gave up. She would stick with it. And I really am, you know, hugely impressed. And she did something I never did. She focused on one business. 12 years later, made a fortune. I've done 100 things at the same time because I've been able to. But only recently, I've started to grow up. Only recently, I've narrowed my focus. I'm much better at saying no. I turn things down. And I've got probably, you know, 4 major things going on business-wise in my life that I'm focused on. And actually, funny enough, in 3 of those, I have the best partners in the world. They do
Mm.
all the work. They bring all the genius. I'm so good now at picking the right partner. Maybe that's the best learning lesson of all.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
yeah. What are some I guess Charlie Munger says invert, always invert. Uh, if we're going to set up the wrong partnership, what are some of our behaviors or what we're not asking or what
Well,
you've
you know,
learned
if
from,
you know a wrong partner very quickly, and you find you know you got the wrong partner very quickly because those little yellow flags keep coming up. But I think an even bigger challenge is marriage. You know, I mean, that expression I lucked out. I met my soulmate. I'm not a spiritual guy. I mean, I'm not a very religious guy. I believe in stoicism, I'm a minimalist. No watches, no jewelry, no possessions of note. And I've simplified my business life. But, you know, without the right partner, you know, husband, wife, whatever, you're only halfway there. You know, you're always backpedaling a little bit. And this woman, Katie Hersov, I'm the luckiest man alive. I really am. I'll stop there.
Amen.
If you want to build $1 trillion fortune, it's got to be in the finding someone the right wife or husband era. It's got to be in
Mm.
that area. You know, if you can find somebody the right partner, I mean, wow, your life is, you know, you're ahead of the game in every aspect.
It seems that culture on a global perspective is changing. Is that part of, if at all, any of your motivation to speak up?
Well,
I
let's
would
get
I
on to
guess
that.
call
So,
you like a
yeah.
pundit or you're like Paul Revere.
I love that, Paul Revere.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
read a book about
I'm
him.
riding along to
Malcolm,
each town saying, Bing, what did he do? Ring his
there were
bell.
multiple people that actually did what he did.
Wow.
Malcolm Gladwell outlined this. I think it was the tipping point. I was in high school or something reading that book. But Paul was the one that knew everyone and they knew him. That was more important. That never left me. It was one of the only things I remember from high school was reading this book, The Tipping Point. And that's what I would say is that when I was
Paul
preparing,
Revere.
you're like Paul.
Thank you.
You're saying
Thank you.
the British are coming. So yeah, there's so much there. Like yeah, yeah.
So my life has been in some ways, I mean, predictable. You know, I did the Goldman Sachs, University Military Service, Goldman Sachs, Harvard Business School, Rupert Murdoch, blah, 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 board directors, building businesses, bloody, bloody, blah. And then after 31 years of living in the US and Europe and the UK, I decided I wanted to come home to South Africa in 2017. And South Africa was being run by the ANC, which is the African National Congress, that had won the election in 95, ended apartheid, and is still basically in control. And in 30 years, in every single metric, health, happiness, unemployment, everything, it's gone backwards. South African Airways was the best airline in Africa, bankrupt.
Wow.
You know, Transnet, incredible rail network, the biggest rail network, more rail in South Africa than the rest of Africa combined, bankrupt. The ANC government has bankrupted this country. We have the highest unemployment rate in the world. It's at 40%. 40%
40%. No.
in the world. This country has been destroyed by the African National Congress. And when I came back in 2017, all the advice I was given by all my friends in South Africa and abroad was come back, keep your head down, make money, and live the life, because it is paradise here. And I even added to that, I said to my wife, you know, this country's probably got 3 years left and then it's finished under Jacob Zuma. He's stealing this country to death. No one's standing up. It's finished. And we only came back potentially for 3 years. And I wasn't going to say a word, and I was going to live the life, show my kids how I grew up, and then head back to the US or Europe. And what happened? I made a speech 3.5 years ago at a business conference that went viral. And I became the accidental capitalist activist in this country, the only business person, really, standing up and calling out the government, calling truth to power. And I have a massive, massive following in South Africa. You know, I say something that goes to 150 to 300,000 viewers,
Wow.
which for a little country, and it's not just white people, it's people of all shapes and sizes, as I
Yeah, I
like
was
to say.
watching you on a podcast. It looked like one of the most watched or something. It was a very,
Mm.
I just want to say as a testimony, I was watching you with the two hosts. You're just like a normal person talking to them and being yourself. And that was
Yeah.
like a breath of fresh air. It looked like it was a famous show in that demographic. I
Thank
had
you.
800,000 views. Like, anyway, I was watching last night in preparation for this conversation. And so I just, sorry to interrupt, but
No, and I've become this political activist unintentionally, accidental. And when the first one went viral, I got calls, thousands of calls and WhatsApps and emails, death threats, screaming at me, what the hell are you doing? And then people going, oh my God, someone's standing up. Oh, we're with you. Thank you for what you're doing. And, you know, then when a white guy in South Africa stands up and calls out the government, what's the first thing you get hit with? The racist card. He's a racist. And what happened was a
oh
lot of
man.
mainly black, colored businessmen, politicians, even the finance minister of the government went on the South African Broadcasting Corporation and said, you may not like Rob, you may not like what he's saying, but he's a patriot and he's come back and he's investing in this country. Leave him alone. He's not a racist. And the racist card disappeared. And then I started getting interviewed on Black South Africans podcasts and telling the truth. And if you look in the comments section, you know, hundreds of thousands of people say, wow, actually, this is kind of an interesting guy. Maybe white business people aren't that evil, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Was there any
And
moment where you were scared and thought about recanting?
I've had so many death threats and to my face on the street. But
Because the reason I'm asking about the fear
yeah,
and recanting is there are listeners that
no, I
go
haven't
through that. Yeah.
ever, ever. Not once have I said, I am afraid I'm not going to do it.
Why
And
not?
here's why.
Yeah,
Here's
yeah.
why. After the thing went nuts and I was thrown into a maelstrom of hell and I didn't know where I was, my father called me and he said, Rob, I've never been more proud of you for doing and saying what other people can't afford to do and say. And my
Wow.
wife said the same thing to me minutes later. And that, my wife and my dad saying that, done. I'm not giving up. And I haven't. And there's an expression in Afrikaans. It's not rude, but it's not polite. It's called futsak. It means bugger off. Okay. And I stood up and said, futsak ANC in a speech. And I said, anyone still voting for the ANC is a moron. And then defined what a moron was, an adult of the mental age of 8 to 12. And I had people absolutely ripping me to shreds, saying this is inflammatory, it's disgraceful, it's insulting. And I said, no, it's true. What the ANC has done to this country is disgraceful, inflammatory, and disgusting. And so now everyone's saying Futsak ANC, people are standing up and calling out the government. And I created the courage for the
Mm.
narrative to speak truth to power. But you asked me, did I ever have doubts? Did I have a fear? The only time I wavered is when my wife and children said they were scared. My daughter came home from school one day about 2 years ago and said to my wife, Mummy, I'm scared because one parent said to another parent, I'm surprised Rob hasn't been taken out. Stuff like that. The kids hear this
Oh,
and they go, "What's daddy doing?" And, my wife has said to me, we don't really have security. She goes, "I am scared. I read the comments in some of these things and people are horrific." But the reality is, I look in the mirror and for the first time in my life, I'm proud of myself. And there's a lovely poem, The Man in the Mirror. You can impress anyone, you can impress the world, but if you're not being truthful to the man in the mirror, you're not being who you are. And all my life, I felt everything came too easily. When I got the job at News Corp, saying one word, that's a typical Rob story. Everyone goes, he fluked his way into Goldman, he fluked his way into Harvard. And how the hell did he get a job with Rupert Murdoch? And how did he get this? And I just have felt very lucky and blessed. But I've also felt I didn't deserve a lot of my luck. You got to make your luck. But I always deep down felt I've just been too damn lucky. But now when I do this political activism, I stand up. It is courageous. It's scary. It's not nice. I mean, there's no upside. It's unlimited downside. But it's the first time I look in the mirror and feel what my dad said. I'm doing what other people can't afford to say and do. And if you believe in legacies, I think you should do in life the right thing and not worry about legacy. I don't want to have a tombstone with my name on it or a university named after me. I don't want a legacy, but I want to do the right thing in this world. And I hope I am. And I have a little thing called a RAK, R-A-K, a random act of kindness. And I do one every day.
that was
So there's a lot
wow.
of inequality in South Africa, a lot of people struggling. Okay, they don't know where the next meal's coming from. And if I go to fill up my car with gas or go into the little shop to buy some chocolate or something, and there are a couple of people behind me with their milk and their bread. That's the basic thing for South Africans. If you really have no money, you buy milk and bread to take home. I'll just say to the lady on my credit card, said, I'm paying for all these people behind me. Not because I want them to know who I am, because I just want someone to give them a little bit of love. Or I see a big lady carrying with her kids, carrying something up a hill, and I can see they're struggling. They've got no money for a cab. I go, hop in, where are you going? And even if it's way out of my way, I call my wife and say, I'm doing a RAK. I'm going to be late. I'm sorry. And I try and do one every single day. And it's not for any other reason that I just know that I have to do that. And it's what I do. So I'm no saint. But
Let's say we're looking at South Africa as a business entity.
that's a great question. Oh,
What's yeah, well, like
it's
it's
bankrupt, by the way.
we yes, okay, so we're I guess in that I'm not familiar so much with the hostile takeover or the right where we're re so like let's say like the it's in bankruptcy court, it's a business, but we see an opportunity. So what's the balance sheet have in there?
What a
What
great question.
assets are in this business that
The
the
assets are massive. We
like
have,
the idea of the intrinsic value, like valuation versus
you
intrinsic,
got
the
it.
Ben Graham kind of thing? The-
So 60 million people made up of 26 different languages, tribes, cultures, religions. That's chaos. It shouldn't be one country. It should be probably 5 countries. Unmanageable from the center. And as a result, everything's broken and everything's destroyed because we have these socialist lunatics that keep thinking more government, but they can't fix what they have. It's bankrupt. But the balance sheet, I mean, what a great question, by the way, Jake. The balance sheet is this. We have every mineral and metal in the world. Everything. You name it. Cobalt, we got it. Chrome, we got it. Copper, we've got it. Iron ore, we've got it. Manganese, we've got it. Rare earths, diamonds, the lot. Everything. And we have oil and gas onshore and offshore that would put most countries to shame, but our government won't let us drill it. So
Wow.
we have everything, absolutely everything. We have a massive rail network, broken. We have fantastic airports, broken. We have incredible entrepreneurs. And let me make a little point here. The two richest people in Los Angeles are both born in South Africa, number one and number two. Elon Musk, Patrick Soon-Shiong owns the Lakers. There are 35 dollar billionaires in America that were born in South Africa.
Wow.
35. And
Wow.
that's more than any other non-American tribe.
Aren't there like 2,000 in the world? So that's
No, it's South African billionaires. I think it's
No, I mean total
per
billionaires,
capita.
right? 2000 or
Correct.
something.
Correct.
That's, you know,
Correct.
pretty substantial.
35 in America from South Africa. Dollar billionaires. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the problem is they don't want to be here. They don't see a future here. Go overseas, big success. So we do have extraordinary human capital, but it's leaving. That's on the balance sheet. We have the most beautiful country in the world. I'm sorry, San Francisco and Sydney, but Cape Town kicks your butt. Cape Town, we got the wine route. We're the seventh floral kingdom in the world. There are 7 floral kingdoms in the world, okay, where the DNA of the plant emanates from one plant.
Wow.
North America is one floral kingdom. South America is one floral kingdom. All of Europe and Western Russia is one floral kingdom. Cape Town is the 7th floral kingdom. We have 16,000 species of plant in Cape Town, more than
Holy
the whole of
cow.
North America. If you don't believe me, go online and have a look. And it is the most beautiful city in the world. And the rest of South Africa, we have everything. We have wild animals, we have beaches. It's the greatest tourist country in the world, and it's not expensive. But people don't really come here because of, it's dangerous, which it is. So on the balance sheet, we have incredible assets. We have huge deficits, which is mainly government, debt, crime, the destruction of the infrastructure. But you've raised a fantastic point. You know, turnaround specialists, you know, turnaround guys.
Absolutely.
Okay, so their skill is catching a falling knife. If you see a company that's bankrupt, falling apart, and you think, I'm going to get this, I'm going to make a fortune, what do? You move like lightning. You buy the company for 5 cents on the dollar, and on the first day, you fire the management, you call the creditors and say, pal, you're going to get 0, or you're going to defer the debt for 5 years. I'm going to call you in 5 years when I fix the company, but until then, you're getting 0 interest and sit tight. Maybe you get some equity. Okay, done, signed, debt off your shoulders. You wipe out the equity, tell the equity holders, bye-bye, you're gone. I own 100%. And you restructure the business. You take the underperforming or non-performing assets or divisions and you sell them off. And you cut the business instantaneously down to the core business, the core assets that you can then build on and make money. That's how turnaround specialists work. South Africa needs a turnaround specialist. We don't need committees. We don't need coalition governments with 20 different people with different missions. We need a Javier Milei of Argentina, and there is one in South Africa, and I'm going to mention his name.
Really?
We
Wow.
need a Javier Milei with a hacksaw to come in and chop waste and inefficiency like Trump and Elon are doing in America,
I just
like
should say,
USA.
considering the historical past, that was a metaphor, right?
What?
That's all.
But there is a guy in South Africa that, and in a way, we do need a benevolent dictator because democracy turning around, catching a falling knife is not for sissies. You've got to be tough and decisive. And
Um,
that guy is Gayton McKenzie. Gayton McKenzie. Google him. He grew up in abject poverty. He's a colored, which means dad was white, mum was black. He was a bank robber and spent 8 years in jail from age 17 to 25. He found redemption, became a businessman, made money, and he's now a politician. And he's now in the government as Minister of Sports, Arts, and Culture. But this man is a libertarian. He came from another planet to me. He came from poverty, bank robber, jail. I came from wealth, Goldman Sachs, Harvard Business School, every opportunity in life. And we met 4 years ago. I had a half-an-hour meeting and I had no idea why I was meeting the guy. Someone set it up. That meeting went for 3 hours and I walked away and I said, I have met one of the most extraordinary human beings walking this planet. He finished I love poems and quotes. He knew them. He reads Ryan Holiday. He believes in God. He's a libertarian, believes in the rule of law. His heroes, Javier Milei in Argentina, Bukele in Salvador, and Trump in America. He is the guy we desperately need to run this country and save it. South Africa.
what do you think are some of the, you know, What do, in your view, what do people that are listening that or read the news clippings miss about some of these figures that they haven't been to Davos and listened to the speech, Javier and Donald in our country? That is a very yeah, I could just think of some relatives not that listen to the
Sure.
show that they really love the show. They because it's that they might be upset with me right now. So like what? And I
You'll
welcome
get
that,
used
right?
to it.
Culture matters, right? We have to have
Culture
everybody that
matters.
has a
Culture
voice
matters. Hmm.
and can share what they think and feel. So I'm proud to have you on the show.
Thank
But
you.
what do we say? What's your view, your take? Because everything that I've done in my research, I admire you. You seem very mentally stable.
Yeah, I am. By the way, I've wrote an article this morning and I'm deciding whether to publish it or not. My wife's asking me, begging me not to. And some of your listeners won't like this. But I think if you believe in any left-wing ideology, you have a mental health problem. If you believe in leftist anything, radical feminism, climate change, activism to net zero level, if you believe in BLM, if you're Antifa, you honestly have a mental health problem. I honestly believe that.
What's your
Socialism doesn't work. Capitalism works. If you look at the absolute happiness index, if you look at any metric, health, happiness, education, anything, and the countries where people most would like to be born in, they are all Judeo-Christian, free market, capitalist democracies. They are not socialist countries. It's not Venezuela and Cuba. And if people believe there are two genders, sorry, if people believe there are more than two genders, they have mental health issues. You want me to be controversial? I don't think it's controversial. I think it's factual. And
I
I've
have
written
actually
an
have a question.
article. Yes, sir.
Could there be are if at all are other because I'm thinking the global picture, the chessboard.
Yeah.
Um, could there be others that benefit from a destabilized your home being destabilized?
Yes.
And I think because if it's, and I would like to go deeper into what
Yeah.
exactly is leading
Yes.
to that balance sheet. So it is more, as objective as we can. But I want to go back into what you just said as well, because we live in a time of, I think, culture war. We're in conflict as a species. We're not sure what's next here. So my question is, first is there a benefit globally to having this company not perform on its
Yes.
own,
Great question.
if at
I
all?
mean,
Is that possible?
just remind me after I've answered that question why I want to shout out to Reagan, Murdoch, Musk, and Trump. Save that for a second.
Right.
Who benefits from South Africa being destroyed? Well, the ANC government does. The ANC government does. There are 20 million South Africans on social grants. There's 60 million people in our country. 20 million are receiving social grants, okay, to keep them afloat.
33% of the population?
And think the rest of the population are children, are people in business, are a third of the population receiving social grants. That's probably most of the people. Our unemployment's the highest in the world.
Wow.
Infrastructure's been destroyed. The country's collapsing. And South Africa is the biggest economy in Africa and is the size of Michigan. Okay, so why do Americans even care about Africa? Well, I'm glad you do. I'm glad some people do because we need your help. We need Trump and team right and Rubio riding to the rescue because we can't save this country ourselves. So who benefits from the collapse of the country? The ANC. If they keep people unemployed, reliant on social grants, undereducated, homeless and hopeless, they will vote for them. And the same applies to the Democrats. The Democrats want people to pour across the border, poor, impoverished, because they're going to vote Democrat. That's all it is. It's absolutely cynical and malevolent. The left-wing ANC and Democrats are cynical and malevolent organizations. And the ANC in our country, keeping people poor, keeping them desperate, keeping them out of the formal economy, means they are totally reliant on the ANC and vote for them. Keeps the ANC in power, the ANC don't care, and they'll keep stealing and breaking. In a functioning economy, in a functioning democracy, it's very hard to steal. But in breakdown of law and order, breakdown of the economy, you can steal and steal and steal. And the African National Congress is a kleptocratic and a neptocratic organization. You know, the State Department reached out to me 2 years ago because this AGOA and fisheries agreement forms had not been filled in. The Americans were saying, well, what is going on? And they said, Rob, do you think it's malevolence or incompetence? And I went, that is such a good question. I think 80% of the ANC is just dumb, incompetent. They don't know how to fill out forms. They don't know how to use, I mean, people in power, they just appoint their friends into important positions, and these guys haven't a clue. But 20% is malevolent. It's actually evil. All of them, my age, who were fighting against me, were trained in the Soviet Union.
Mm.
And this is feeding through. This cultural Marxism is coming out in BLM, in what we have, BEE, Black Economic Empowerment,
Are
radical
there
feminism, cultural
are there
Marxism.
are there countries? What countries are an ally with this country globally?
Oh my God, you've asked a good question. 3 days ago, Trump just said, I've had enough of South Africa voting against America in every single, you know, South Africa is the seventh worst country in supporting America. Just votes against everything America ever says. And Trump said, I'm pulling your aid. I'm pulling all aid to South Africa for the next 3 months to review. And he's right. Why should you Americans gift South Africa $1 billion a year, and on every single thing in the United Nations, our government votes against you? I'm surprised you didn't pull it earlier, but Democrats are too weak to do that. So good for Trump, good for Elon Musk. And thank goodness that they're actually focused on South Africa, because we can't fix this place on our own. We're just going down the plug. We need you guys to ride to the rescue. Now, who benefits? Russia, China, Iran. Now, South Africa filed this genocide suit against Israel in the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, ICC, International Criminal, ICJ. South Africa filed that. Why South Africa? Because Iran paid the ANC government to do it. Paid. America should absolutely put all the ANC members on whatever it's called, the red list, freeze their bank accounts, not let them travel to the West, and brand them as terrorists. They are Iran proxies, as bad as Hamas and the Houthis. They're evil. So now, let me get to my point. We have culture war in the world. At the end of the Second World War, and when the Berlin Wall came down, and when Russia, the Soviet Union collapsed, we thought we'd won. We being the free market, free enterprise, Adam Smith, America, good guys, okay? We thought we'd won, but we were complacent because they didn't give up. They infiltrated our universities. I mean, look at this horrendous state of the American universities and the leftism there. They infiltrated all the organizations in the United Nations, and they turned the narrative against America and against the West and against free enterprise. And it's permeated everywhere in the world. I mean, Europe's quasi-socialist. And so the only reason we'd be able to move the pendulum back, turn the corner, is firstly, thank you, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Thank you, Rupert Murdoch, for founding Fox News, for setting up a conservative center-right broadcasting company and fighting mainstream media, the evil CNN and others. Thank you, Elon Musk, for standing up, backing Trump, and for buying Twitter and turning it to X and freeing speech. And thank you, America, for bringing Trump in, because we were going to lose worldwide, but the pendulum is swinging the other way. And if you look at what Elon Musk is doing, South African born, don't forget, he's one of
That's
us.
interesting. What's in the water over there?
I know. It's like, and yesterday, Dricus du Plessis, do you follow UFC?
No, what
Ultimate Fighting Challenge? Ultimate Fighting Challenge. South African Dricus du Plessis beat Strickland to retain his title. Yeah, the Octagon. He's South African. The Springbok rugby team's #1. There's definitely something in our water. But if Elon hadn't got behind Donald Trump, I think Trump still would have won, but not by as big a margin. And the pendulum is swinging back. We're getting rid of all this cultural Marxism like DEI and Antifa and BLM and all this horrific stuff. And other countries in the world are starting to get the courage to do the same. But Elon is identifying political parties or individuals, Germany, UK, and hopefully South Africa, to fight against this leftist evil, this woke mind virus.
What's been the reception for those that agree with you but aren't speaking up?
It's quite funny because before Trump got elected, I was Trump, Trump, Trump. And my daughter came home one day from school. She's 13 now. And she said, Daddy, please don't be so Trump, Trump, Trump. Everybody's getting upset. And I said to her, darling, every single one of your friends' daddies supports Trump. They're just not saying it publicly. And half the mummies. And sure enough, when Trump gets elected, all of a sudden everyone came out of the woodwork and, oh, we're so happy Trump won and blah, blah, blah. But I was kind of the only guy saying it beforehand. And I think that's what's happening in the world. The majority of people are decent, hardworking, want a rule of law, want a better life for their children and for the next generation. And they're effectively, like us, good people. But it's the sort of people with mental health problems that dictate the narrative on the left and shout down good people like you and me, who might have stood up in the bad times to say, you're wrong. You're wrong. And if I look at my heroes, Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, Konstantin Kisin, I can go on and on and on. There are many more. Dave Rubin, and I want to meet those four people. Please, someone introduce me to them. My heroes. They were standing in the wilderness. They were a light standing in the wilderness. And that light is shining brighter and brighter, and more people are rallying around it. So, we stand a chance, but we must not get complacent this time around.
What are some
we
of
must
the
slay the
specific
beast.
ideas that have been performed over the last 3 decades that you would say have led to this 40% unemployment and this slowdown of opportunities in this
So
South
it's socialist rhetoric. It's socialist rhetoric, but crucially, there's a thing called cadre deployment. Some people say CADRE, CADRE. And cadre deployment was a policy implemented in the early 2000s by the ANC government in secret meetings that loyalists would be placed in positions of power, positions of influence, and positions of control of budgets, all the way from senior positions, head of South African Airways, down to handling a sewage plant or handling a railway station. And those budgets were then stolen, misappropriated, or redirected to some evil cause, mostly stolen by the ANC. And what happens when you have a maintenance budget that goes missing? Eventually, the pipes crack, the rails break, electricity doesn't work. And that's where we are today.
And what's the group that stands a chance to be able to vote them out? What's that?
So I think we've got 40% of the population even voted. People have given up on it. They just think it's never going to change. We're
Only
stuck.
40% of the whole population of that
It might even be
million.
less. And of that 40%, this election in May 2024 was the first time in 30 years the ANC, the evil racist organization that's run our country, fell below 50%. They went to 41%. And they had to form a coalition with the parties that you and I would support: Democratic Alliance, Patriotic Alliance, Freedom Front Plus, and the Zulu and Carter organization, which took them to 66%. But that GNU is going sideways. It's not working. It's not. The one thing they've never talked about is economic growth. They're just in power with the ANC to keep a more evil group of people out of power. Jacob Zuma and a man called Julius Malema, who stands up in a football stadium of 100,000 people and says, one bullet, one settler, meaning kill the whites. He says, kill the whites publicly.
Holy moly.
And I read a tweet an hour ago before we spoke where Elon Musk said, put Julius Malema on the terrorist list. Good for Elon, good for Trump. Julius Malema is saying, kill the white man publicly in South Africa. Where in the world can you get away with that? and
Whoa.
he gets away with it.
So I want to make sure I'm tracking that this country that has a strong balance sheet, that's losing money, and its
Falling
customers
apart.
aren't being served at the level of possibility. There are, it seems like there's a battle behind the scenes of who's going to control the board. Iran, Russia, China,
Correct. Yeah.
U.S., and whoever's around. I know you. What would the West be representative of? UK, US. I don't really know.
Yeah. America, UK, France, Germany, Japan, South
Like,
Korea,
isn't we
Australia.
look at the world
Australia.
globally,
Yeah.
there's inherently different ways that people want to approach life. Those in positions of power, influence, and control. And this could be a what, control of the board in a sense. And if six billionaires of the 35 are actually living there or something like that.
Correct. Correct.
Most, but there's real strong IP out there in the world around this beautiful place, you're saying. And you believe that your part of your thesis is if we just speak up, we can take the company back and make it great.
Yes, you
And
can.
there's a lot of opportunity to invest and do it the right way, where everybody wins. Much more of an Adam
If you
Smith thesis.
if you gave me the presidency, which I don't want, I could take this country from where it is today, less than 1% economic growth. Less than 1% economic growth is an embarrassment, to 3 to 5% in 1 year economic growth, where people be coming out of poverty. But the government doesn't want to do it because the minute you implement the changes that are so simple to turn this thing around, they lose the ability to steal.
Well, you
And it's a
mentioned the
mafia
incompetent
organization.
malevolent component. And that's interesting to me because there are those that might have dedicated their lives to believe that what they're doing, is helpful. And then there are those that are dedicating their lives, uh, and they have, I guess, what they view as good or evil is very different than what someone else. And if you just have 80-20 of those two, you have a scenario like that.
So, so could we vote them out, the ANC? Well, there's a possibility in 2029. But what are we going to do in the 4 years, the 4.5 years till then? We are going down the plug. We're going to have way more unemployment, everything falling apart. America's our second biggest trading partner. It used to be our biggest by far. China's now our biggest trading partner.
Oh, so that okay.
China's our biggest trading partner.
I'm
America's
not
our second
surprised
biggest.
by that from this
Well,
conversation.
but China, I know this. Okay, it's 5-1 the deficit against South Africa. Okay, so they're basically China and Russia just shredding us, ripping us off. It's the thing that upsets Donald Trump about the American trade relationship with other countries. He goes, "I'm sorry, guys, but you know, it's unbalanced. We need to rebalance it." But we just don't have the leverage to rebalance the trade deficit with China and Russia because they're ripping us off. And they're paying the ANC on the way. It's just bribery. So the shareholder battle, as you put it beautifully, America could easily take control. The country would flourish. But the current management, the ANC, don't want it to flourish because they can't steal. So they'd rather have Russia and China shred it because they don't really care about the people, the employees. They do not care. That's at the shareholder level. I love the way you're putting it. So at the operational level, down below, it's fixable, but not if you have a management team that is not incentivized to fix it, which they're not, because they're stealing. They're not balancing the books. They're stealing.
Now, if 33% of the population is being incentivized below awareness not to rebel by I'm being paid, I'm getting in some type of social compensation, then where's the wellspring of hope? Like,
There
what?
isn't.
Okay.
There isn't. There is none. The wellspring of hope is that America, as of 3 days ago, has pulled aid, is threatening tariffs, is hopefully going to put some of these mobsters on the terrorist list or the red list or whatever it's called. And if America just walks away, I don't blame you. Why should you care? You've got enough things to deal with. Why should you care? Well, the other thing that has been announced by Donald Trump is he said he will give refugee status to Afrikaners. What it really means is to to the white, black, colored, and Indian people in South Africa who are talented and extraordinary, and who could easily move to America and create incredible value, like all the South Africans that have gone to America in advance. And he's offering us a way in, a way out. He's saying, okay, if South Africa is not going to behave, they're going to stay an enemy of ours. You're getting no more aid, no more investment, and actually, we'll just take your best people. And I've always wondered why America, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand haven't said to South Africans, we'll give you visas. We want all your doctors, all your lawyers, all your engineers, and just stolen our country blind, because I think we have the best business talent in the world. I think the South African expats in America are the wealthiest expats, ahead of the Israelis per capita in America. We're the most successful expats in the world.
Wow.
And I mean, somebody should do the math there, but I think we've outgunned the Israelis in America in terms of wealth and success, us South Africans. So what Donald's done, I'm very intelligent. He said, we'll just take your best people. And every single young graduate that I speak to that's just hanging on here because they love this country would jump. Boom.
In this culture, are the people allowed to gather and speak? And
yes, look, I have to say,
because I'm not very
there's
familiar
freedom
with
of speech in South Africa. The fact I haven't been shot or thrown in jail is extraordinary.
Yeah, why do you think you haven't? I guess that would be the first.
Yeah. Do you want to know why?
I don't know
That's
a
a good
lot about
question.
this
Here's why.
culture yet. Yeah.
Yesterday, my wife was again worried about security. So I called 3 top people: the head of a religion in South Africa, the chief guy, who obviously has security, the head of one of the political parties, who's very, very prominent, and a billionaire who has security. And I said, should I be worried about security? Not for me, but for my wife and kids. And I said, I don't think I'm a threat. And that's why I'm allowed to keep saying what I say, because I'm not naming the names of people stealing the money. So I'm not taking away their ability to steal. So they have no interest. I'm not pointing out specifically the people that are stealing, putting the spotlight on them. So I'm not really a threat. I'm an irritant. They don't like what I'm saying, but I'm too prominent. If they take me out, there's going to be all hell breaks loose. So I'm actually too high profile, but not a real threat. I'm a massive irritant, but not a real threat.
High profile people, they crash cars all the time.
Yeah, they do. They do. My car is a big FJ Cruiser that's been pimped up. It's the only possession I care about. And that's
I care about
uncrashable.
you, Rob. I know you about 70 minutes, but you're just a joy to talk to. And it's very admirable. The idea, like one lesson I'd like our audience to take away would be just if you think something, say it, right? Peterson has taught us uh, thinking, believing something and not saying it is a lie. On that note, the Alliance of Responsible Citizenship, that's how we connected through that unbelievable app. I can't say enough because I actually had the great joy of having Dr. Taylor, who will also be there with us on the show last weekend from this app. How did you get in contact with, or how did you come into recognition or
Of
with this
art.
Alliance of Responsible Citizenship?
Because I
Art,
follow
yes.
Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, Konstantin Kisin, Joe Rogan, Patrick Bet-David. I mean, all in my YouTube's those guys. And ARC just popped up, and I received an invitation. I saw that fantastic speech by Konstantin Kisin last year at ARC. I went, my God, what a conference. I wish I'd been there.
Wow.
And I must have filled out a form, or somebody would have noticed me, and I received an invitation to sign up straight away. I can't wait. I'm so excited to go. I
For
want to
those that,
speak there. I want to be one of the speakers there.
oh, I could see that easily. For those that don't know what it is, what is ARC to you?
ARC to me is a conservative, libertarian, free market organization of the greatest speakers of all in this area, the bravest, most courageous pioneers who've been leading the light of culture on our behalf. And it's 4,000 people, I think 5,000 people are going. So it's going to
Yes.
be,
Oh, at least. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Dave Rubin, please, I've sent you my mobile phone. Call me back. I want to be on your show. What I want to do is get on their show, and as I've done with you, and thank you, and be a voice for South Africa internationally. Most people don't know what's going on in South Africa and frankly don't care. And I don't blame them. But we have a chance if we can get the likes of the USA to pay attention. We could save this country, and it is fixable. And the balance sheet has great assets, great assets.
In another interview that someone asked why the South African Defense Force, you signed up for that as a young man. Was it Basil, your father said, this country's done a lot for us?
He said, you know, Rob, I don't know where this country's going. It's under huge pressure. It could collapse. Anything could happen. But it's been good to us and we've made our way. And you must go and do your military service. Don't even question it. Just sign up and go. You know, a lot of kids in those days were leaving the country saying, I don't believe in apartheid. And he said, look, whatever, go and do your 2 years. You then have the option to stay and we'll see what happens. And it was an extraordinary 2 years. You know, so would I have preferred for it to be 1 year? Yeah, but I was an infantry officer. I did my bit, and I'm proud of it. I tell everyone, even my black friends who are on the other side of the table, suffering from apartheid, they respect the fact that I was in the military, did my bit, didn't run away.
What advice do you have for our entrepreneurs that, or even the employees and listeners that have jobs that they're working for, they don't agree with what's going on in their culture in their life? Like, what do they do? What do they
So
do?
it's I've been deplatformed from 20, 30 events, that I get invited to, and then one day before I get this call, I'm so used to the call, I know it's coming. And they go, about the event tomorrow night. I go, yes, I know it's coming. And someone has said he's too controversial, deplatform him. So I'm kind of used to that. But my advantage is I can't be fired because I'm independently wealthy. I don't have 20,000 employees, so I don't have that responsibility. I can't be fired. I don't care about being deplatformed, and I don't care about telling the truth because I've been through so many hits. I've got so many friends who won't talk to me anymore and made so many new friends who are extraordinary that I'm just bulletproof. I like to say I've got my own back. You know what I mean? And my advice is it's very difficult for an individual in a corporate culture, in an organization where they really don't believe in the culture, to stand up and state the case. They can be fired. They can have a glass ceiling put above their head. But find your like-minded people in that organization. They're there. They're being as nervous and scared and quiet as you. Find them, seek them out, and there's strength in unity. Have each other's backs. And there'll be a time when the line has to be crossed. That's the point. You need to cross the line because you'll never look back. You'll say, I did the right thing at the right time. The consequences were X. End of story.
What do you think Nelson Mandela would do today?
He'd be disgusted with the ANC. He would be horrified that the ANC that he led, that the democracy he brought to South Africa had come to this. He'd say it was a disgrace. And it is.
If we were to get in the mind of the current leadership, what for the percentage that, let's say that it's a bit gray, like it's not like, oh, okay, they clearly have their own self interest agenda or are working for some, what could be some of the rationalizations that one in that position could be telling themselves to? Because the reason I'm asking this is I see small business all the time. The founders, not the lies, but honest lies, honest and public lie to themselves. You know, Peterson talks a lot about Dostoevsky and Crime and Punishment and Raskolnikov's self-deception. So, like, what would be could be some of the rationalizations that these people are
You
are
know,
are telling themselves,
so
if at all?
facts don't lie. Facts don't lie. If you look at capitalism and socialism, socialism doesn't work. People go, oh, socialism hasn't been tried properly. It's been tried properly. East Germany, Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela. It's been tried properly and it fails. Capitalism has been tried even in China and has brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. It works. So I've got friends that I argue with the whole time on the other side of the spectrum that just will not accept the fact that here are the facts. Socialism doesn't work. Capitalism works, and still can't get their heads around it. So I don't know what it is. It's like, it's not, it can't just be indoctrination, and it can't just be stupidity. I think it's a form of mental illness. I think if you're a left winger, you've got some form of mental illness. I really do. You heard it here first.
Rob, I could talk to you all day. I appreciate your candor, and I hope that's what the audience takes away. A bit like is we have to have the conversations. I don't, I'd like to invite the person on that has the best argument for why it isn't mental illness. I don't think that's me. So,
I don't know who
nor
that
would
is,
I
but I'd
try to
love
be.
to. I'm
You
going
know
to
what I'm
tee you
saying?
up.
Like that's what this is
Yeah.
about. Culture matters. So
Yeah.
thank you for, and I chat, where can people listen to that first speech that you gave? I found it on YouTube. It was I think that's where you stood up and you just said, "Hey, this is." It's like in the movies where there's like in the movies there's like that
Tipping
scene where
point.
the guy all of a sudden somebody says everything everybody's thinking, or right, there's something admirable about that. But where do people go listen to that speech? Because I
So
thought that was
it
very impactful.
it was
That
about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. It was Biz News, Biznews, Drakensberg Conference, DRAK. It's a mountain range. Drakensberg Conference. Rob
Drakensberg.
Hersov.
You
You'll
know,
find it.
and something else I want to
But
highlight it in
yeah.
Beyond Order, Dr. Peterson's third book. Our listeners, we're doing a monologue series on each rule. I'm on rule 3, but rule 6 is abandon ideology. So I want to remind the listeners that for all of us, an idea that we hear at first that might spark us to want to not listen anymore, that could be our own, as far as what I've learned from Dr. Peterson, my own, attraction to ideology. So for now, of course, the paradox is they might have tuned out a while ago. They're not listening to what I
True.
said.
So, and what I want to do is give you two of my favorite quotes, which most people have tuned out
Please,
already on.
please.
Okay, so life is a mystery to be lived, not a problem to be solved. We really sweat the small stuff and worry, and then you got to and as a minimalist, what matters to me is just great experiences, memories for the rocking chair. I mean, my wife and I live for great experiences and that stuff. And I say, remember when we did, and I laugh about it, memories for the rocking chair. But here's something beautiful I heard from a friend of mine, an Irish friend of mine called Dermot Desmond, who really is a rabbi of mine in a spiritual sense, if you know what I mean. And he said, happiness is three things: something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to.
Hmm.
And when you're very, very old and you lose something to do, you really don't have anyone to love anymore, and you've got nothing to look forward to. That's when your life ends. And I think it's a beautiful way to simplify happiness.
Hmm.
And that's it. There's my quote for you.
And what I've learned from this is 20 million people are being robbed of something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to. Rob, thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast. Please, if you're listening to this, share this with someone that you think this isn't for. And maybe you can have a great conversation with somebody that you love. You'll have something to do, something to talk about, something to think about, an experience to take away from that. And follow Rob on X, Rob Hersov. I followed him this morning, and we'll see you all in London in February at ARC.
You bet. Look
Please
forward
leave
to
us
it.
a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks, brother.